substitute teachers of Reddit. What's the worst thing that's happened while you were subbing? My wife subbed and she had a student pick up his desk and throw it at the ceiling projector. Broke the projector, dang near hit another student on the way down, and scared the crap out of everyone. Apparently, that's the student's response to "Did you already turn in your homework?" Maybe it was written on the desk. I was threatened with detention by another teacher who thought I was a student. Probably not the most exciting story. Sorry. All I did was bring a Coke somewhere I shouldn't have. If I were a student, I was heading into the office to get my badge, class list, etc. The secretary just started glaring at me. I smiled and said hi. This did not do anything to ease the rage-filled glare. She finally asked for my name, which I gave her. She took out a detention slip and was about to start filling it in just as I was telling her who I was and what I was doing there. She was embarrassed to say the least. I have always looked really young and I was also wearing what all the kids were required to wear as their uniform. That was almost 10 years ago and I still look like I could be in high school, minus the bald spot. My buddy still works there and she still gets crap for it. The regular teacher for this video production class I had in high school was hospitalized, so they brought in a long-term substitute teacher. First day she comes in, everyone's rather morose. She says in a joking tone, "You guys are like someone died or something." A popular student had died of suspected overdose after a school dance the night before. Oh crap, ouch. I subbed for a particular 5th grade teacher twice, and only twice. There was one boy in that class who had serious anger and behavior issues. The first day I subbed in that class, the boy in question got in an argument with a girl. She was the only kid in the class who wasn't terrified of him and would stand up to him. And he knocked her down and then picked up a chair and threw it at her. She was okay. BTW. Just injured her pride. That time, I ordered him outside and called the security guard, but she just brought him back to class 30 minutes later. The whole staff seemed as clueless as I felt about how to deal with him. The next time, I was determined to get through to this kid with positive reinforcement. It was working until just after lunchtime. The same girl stood up to him again and this time he just went all MMA on her. I'm shouting at him and shoving other kids out of the path of destruction, and just as I'm diving to catch his jacket and pull him off her, I see this wild look in his eye like he's just come up with a diabolical plan. He tackles the girl from the front and shoves her about 5 feet across the room into the wall where the hooks they hang their jackets and backpacks on are protruding from the wall. It knocked the breath out of her and she slumped down and didn't move or cry or anything for what seemed like an eternity. This time, the boy went out the door on his own and sat down in the hall to wait while I called security. Then, terrified, I checked the girl's back. She had 2 huge dents where the hooks had jabbed her, but no break in the skin. The same thing happened as before. The security guard just brought him back. Later, I asked another teacher about that kid, and she said that when they call his parents, the mom just cries and says she's sorry. The dad is in the military and since his son is so well behaved at home, he doesn't really believe he does these things at school. I think the kid and his mom are both bullied and abused at home. TLDR. I subbed for a 5th grader who may have actually been an MMA fighter. Are you freaking serious? The fact that that kid wasn't at least suspended is appalling, and probably dangerous. When I was reading off attendance, I read off the name of the kid who had died earlier in the year. This was a kindergarten class and one of the kids yells he's dead. Teachers, if your student dies, please for the all that is holy update your dang roster. Had an autistic boy let me win at Wii Bowling because he had consistently kicked my butt for most of the year. Was eating lunch in the teacher's room and 2 teachers are talking about a student and how they think she is changing and how they have certainly noticed a change and that might be the cause of why she is so moody. About 5 minutes into the conversation it finally dawns on me what they are talking about and I let out a big and they just bust out laughing. Once while subbing for art, a 3rd grader asked me how to draw a girl getting pregnant. I told her they don't pay me enough for that and then told her to just draw a girl with a big belly. A kid crap himself. I was assured by the teacher that he does that all the time. Gee, thanks for the heads up. One time we had a sub in my high school chem class, and as he was reading the attendance sheet he calls the name of someone who wasn't there and this kid goes, "Sorry, we lost track of her," or something along those lines. The next name he called was a kid who'd run away from home 1.5 months earlier and was still missing, and the same kid from before goes, oh crap, we really lost him. A student burst out of the cupboard at the back of the classroom halfway through my first lesson. Being unfamiliar with the room, I hadn't even realized the cupboard was big enough to hide a human, albeit a small one. And with hindsight, it's mildly impressive he managed to stay in there for as long as he did. He charged at me with a compass in his hand and tried to stab me in the thigh with it. The little crap. Probably not the worst thing ever, but the most unexpected. I only subbed for a few months. Fortunately, I don't envy those who do it long term. This is why I couldn't be around bad kids. From having little brothers, I would have instinctively kneed the little sucker in the gut, then explain my actions to the principal, parents, cops, etc. I have several stories. Here's a brief synopsis of each. Administering test. One student won't quit talking. Eventually asks to go to the restroom. I tell him not until he's finished with the test. He walks out anyways. When he comes back, I hand him a referral to the office. He threatens me. Says I'd better watch my back when I walk to my car. Comes back every passing period to remind me. Calling me the N-word each time. Wrote a new referral since I knew he didn't actually go to the office. And when I inform the administration, they say, "What do you want us to do about it?" As a side note, I'm in the Army Reserves, and I'm decently in shape. But this dude was giant and on the high school football team. I was still afraid. Overheard two high school girls, one saying, "My dad told me last night that if I don't have 2 kids by the time I graduate, I won't be able to support myself on welfare." During lunch at one of the high schools, I saw cops storming the lunch area shooting pepper balls into crowds of fighting students. Next week, same school, noticed uniforms walking past the classroom as I was teaching. 2 ATF agents, local PD, school police, security, and stormed the class across from mine. Student in my class asked if he could hide his weed in the class in case they ended up searching my room too. Worst one yet. I was teaching 6th grade at an elementary school. Accidentally told the kids I was P. The principal's daughter was in the class. She immediately asked to use the restroom and went and told on me. The principal removed me from the class, put a different sub in there, and stuck me in kindergarten with another sub. You should have beat the principal's daughter up after she told on you. I'm a full-time teacher, but Friday I was finishing after school detention, which ends at 5, when the long-term sub we have for another teacher on maternity leave approaches me. He's frantic that his phone and wallet were stolen. He proceeds to tell me that he was giving 3 kids a ride home from school, which is a huge no-no. Well, it seems he had his bag in the back seat with the kids and now his phone and wallet were missing. As he's telling me this, one of the students walks by the office. I question him and eventually he admits, but says they sold the phone at the mall to a salesman at the Verizon kiosk for $60, an iPhone 4S. I drive to the mall with the kid and his parent, and he points out the manager as the one who bought it. The guy is freaked out and only says I didn't know they were middle school kids, and as he hands me the phone says, "What about my $60? The kid says they all spent it on food and each bought a shirt, and the parent says he's not giving the guy a dime. So I tell the guy, call the cops, have them come and you can explain how you bought a stolen phone from 13-year-olds. He says he'd rather not get the kid in trouble. Yeah, right. I drove back to the school and gave the sub his phone, and at that point, 8 PM, the principal finally arrived, and so I wrote a statement and then drove home to have a beer. I'm interested to see what happened to all the kids when I get to school on Monday. Update. Unlike the safe guy I deliver, so the 2 kids in the back admitted they stole the phone and wallet without the kids sitting shotgun knowing. The police cited those 2 for theft, which means they will probably get community service and have to pay restitution. They evidently dumped the guy's wallet in a trash can at the mall, so that's gone. The 2 boys said they used all the money, $60 from the phone and $20 from the wallet, to buy t-shirts at Foot Locker and then eat pizza in the food court. Both kids were suspended for 5 days. We only have 10 days left in school. As for the guy who bought the phone, the police were going to look into that. Update us. I had a sub that was just the strangest guy ever. This kid was sharpening his pencil while he was teaching and it was quite loud. Suddenly the teacher stops talking, growls, and pulls out a knife. Everyone starts freaking out, and the teacher walks over to the kid, takes his pencil and starts sharpening it with the knife. Turns out he was actually a really cool guy. My biology teacher in middle school was also a very avid hunter. When we were doing internal anatomy, he brought a few grouses that he had shot over the weekend and cut them open for all of us to see what birds look like internally with a pair of crappy school scissors. Picture the scene. As I'm sat in my office, being a full-time teacher, though, I share the office with about 6 others. A 15-year-old girl is escorted in by the sub for being disruptive in class. I have never met the pupil before. She sits down to do some work she had been given by the sub. I ask her what happened. On this particular day the argument had more or less finished when the sub called her a little freaking bee. At this point I really started paying attention instead of just shooting the breeze. Apparently the pupil and the sub had running battles for the last few years ever since she popped my birthday balloon when I was 12, and it had kicked off once again. The girl in question wasn't normally disruptive, just when this teacher was around. So the lesson finishes and the sub comes to collect the pupil. There's more tension. Sub yells at pupil and then dismisses her. I asked what had happened and she said, well, she was being uncooperative. I suppose she told you I called her a little freaking bee? Well, I did, and I don't regret it, because she is, always has been, and flounced off. She hasn't subbed at the school since, but she may be off somewhere else yelling at kids. I didn't like her. Fist fight in a 7th grade class. 13-year-olds. It was between 2 girls. 2 Muslim girls, both wearing hijabs. The hijabs went flying, and the class freaked out. Not because of the fight, but because they finally got to see the girl's hair. A student once asked me if I would show him my C in front of the class. I asked an aide to take him outside. This was an all-male SH class, and speak to him about proper language. Wrote him up and let him back in. Later in the day I was helping him with some work and he starting whispering C. I tried the conflict resolution plan that the teacher had left me, only riled him up more. We ended up having to send him home as he started screaming C and touching himself. The male aide who came and helped us said this was pretty common behavior for him, which was why he was on a 50% integration plan into SH. That was the end of SH subbing for me. Don't know how people teach SH as a career. Dang. We at least just stared at the teacher's butt when she wasn't looking like civilized people. One student called me a W on my very first day. How delightful. Another student assaulted me for taking away his candy. Really? Over candy? In my senior year in high school, the 78-year-old sub walked out to use the bathroom. A kid then proceeded to draw a dong that covered the entire back wall, a good 50 feet. The sub walked back in and just said nice caterpillar. Honestly, if the sub knew it was a dong, that is a good way to shut a kid down. Act completely oblivious to their frickery and then kill them with kindness. About a month ago I had a student fall to the ground while trying to sit in his chair. Everyone laughed at him and he thought that another student beside him had pulled the chair out from under him. We all agreed that wasn't the case. The student on the ground started hitting the other student in the leg, and I stepped in and told him to knock it off. I turned around to talk to another teacher when student B, the one who was hit, stood up and shoved student A across the room. At that point I jumped in and asked student B what he was thinking. He said, "Look at my freaking leg," and I looked to see that he had about 1/2 inch of pencil sticking out of the side of his knee. Student A wasn't hitting him, he was stabbing him. 8/10 would cringe again. Nothing too horrible. A kindergartner with emotional issues threw a temper tantrum over not being able to eat in the classroom, complete with hurling water bottles, backpacks, and finally desks. Yup, little kindergarten desks flung across the room. Called the principal. She came in and asked why I didn't just teach class while bear hugging the kid. I refused to sub for that class again until I heard he had been moved to the special ed class. There was a lockdown drill scheduled for 1:15 p.m. However, I couldn't keep track of the kids because I had no roll sheet, no assistants, and no schedule for when kids were to leave my class and go to the mainstream class for a subject. The class was a 6th or 7th grade special ed, and some students were non-verbal. So the drill happened and one of my kids was in another class for music. The principal personally knocked on my door, kid in tow, and coldly told me I was responsible for this kid's life, and that I should never make this mistake again. No kidding. An actual bomb threat explosive near the school. Their code for lockdown bomb threat was to page the previous principal to the office. For example, Mr. Stepanek to the office please. All the regular teachers knew that particular principal had retired. I only knew because someone had offhandedly mentioned it to me during training. So I locked the door from the outside with the key because there was no way to do so from inside. Turned off the lights, drew the blinds, and had the kids get under their desks away from the window. After about a half hour, the phone rang. I may have yelped, and I was filled in. The park next to the school had a pipe bomb in a garbage can. The police were there. They were going to detonate it when they got into position. So about an hour later we all heard a small bang, and it was safe to take the kids to recess. Phew. Junior high is a nightmare. Generally I don't have any control over the classroom and kids start fights with each other. Then they don't do any work and complain to the teacher that I didn't tell them the assignment. High school gifted and talented started aggressively opening all the drawers and cabinets, even though I asked them not to, and then started going through my purse, backpack and lunch bag. I grabbed all my things, yelled at them to sit down in their seats, and stood near the door because I was afraid of them. They then spent the last 15 minutes of class making fun of me. I was bullied as a kid. It didn't go well. There was also no phone to call the office for help. Overall, most days subbing were fine, but those crappy days really stick out in your memory. I'm very thankful to have never had a big emergency. Had a pre-K kid throw a hard temper tantrum because he couldn't sit where he wanted to. He got so freaking crazy that the other teachers, I was in for the aid, had to physically restrain him, and one of the teachers got cut up and was bleeding. The next time I saw the aide I had been in for, she was like, "Heard you had a normal day with student's name." My high school had a substitute teacher who bore a passing resemblance to Morgan Freeman. He was yelling at one particularly disruptive student and the student stood up and screamed, "Yeah, well I hate your movies," and walked out the door. Morgan Freeman sub didn't stay around much longer after that. How could you hate Morgan Freeman movies? The little crap. When I was working as a long-term sub, we had a drunk 6th grader in the hall and another teacher, and I had to take him to the principal. He fought us the whole way. Drunk 6th grader is now on my list of crap I need to see. I've subbed for only a semester, but I apparently found the worst students. One class, I had a student decide they wanted to sneak into the dressing rooms. It was a theater class, and start smoking M. I found out about it when they didn't come back after 15 minutes and ended up walking into a room filled with lots of smoke. Another, we had a group of students decide that they were frisky and needed to get their rocks off, so they snuck off during an activity to the dressing rooms again and started to have a gangbang. Yeah, I saw way too much of 5 of those kids. It was kind of awkward explaining to the principal too. I did high school wrong, apparently. I had a sub who was just a horrible person. First, she wouldn't let anyone go to the bathroom under any terms, which was quite messed up because this was a 1st grade classroom. Because of this, 3 of my classmates had relieved themselves, and she sent them to the principal's office for inappropriate actions. Then, when there was a kid picking up his pencil, she pinched him to get his attention and spit on him for some reason. The majority of my class, then, were of color, and it wasn't obvious that she was xenophobic until she blurted out loud after there was one kid talking out of turn, "You motherfucking idiots. Someone ought to package you in and send you back to Africa." After that, she stormed out of the room and we just sat there in fear until class ended. Did I mention that this was a 1st grade classroom? We complained to our normal teacher the next day, and then the sub was immediately fired and was stripped of her teaching license. Justice. Frick yeah. My weirdest single day was the first day I subbed in a support unit, special needs classes. I'd only been teaching for about 3 months, and I was willing to take work in any subject area at all. I was with another teacher, supervising an excursion to the Australian National Maritime Museum. The group we were taking was a mix of kids with intellectual disabilities, behavior problems and autism. To get there, we catch public transport. One student becomes so overexcited about being on a bus that she throws up on my shoes. When we get there, I'm lining up my half of the group, maybe 15 kids, and remarking the roll. Teacher stuff. One of the higher functioning autistic kids comes up to me and says, "Miss, I think you're doing a really fantastic job. and I want to show you my appreciation by giving you a hug. I start politely explaining that a hug isn't appropriate teacher-student contact, but that a high five or a fist bump is fine. And this kid, 14 year or so, just reaches out and put both his hands on my tee. I shriek in surprise, and the other teacher looks up, comes over and tells the kid off, then says, "Sorry, I should have warned you he's a groper." I later found out that kid would basically try any excuse to touch female teachers. The best bit of the day, though, is when we're about to go inside the submarine. The submarine is docked in Darling Harbor, which is filthy and full of sharks. To get inside, you have to walk on top of the submarine. One of the kids, as we're on top of the submarine, says it's a hot day today, miss. I'm having a swim. Then he takes off all his clothes and starts walking to the edge of the submarine. I have a brief moment of sheer panic where I weigh up my choices. Will I get in more trouble if I tackle a naked 13-year-old boy, or if I let him jump in the harbor? I grab the kid around the chest and yell for the classroom aide to help me. She just replies, "Oh, we're not supposed to touch the kids." Later she says you should have let him jump in. Drowning might have taught him a lesson. We're not supposed to touch the kids. What a balls statement. If a child is about to endanger him, herself, or others, you as an adult should step in. The consequence of losing your job is much better than letting a child hurt him, herself, or others. My mum was doing teacher training in some dodgy school before I was born, and some kid who was high from sniffing glue at lunch stabbed another kid in the head with a glass pipette. I heard that was pretty bad. Cute. A sweet little girl came up to me and asked if I wanted to see her drawing. Me, sure. Wow, that's a beautiful angel you've made. Her, thank you. My dad is dead. Did not know how to respond. He sure is. That is how I would have expected you to, if I was her age. My dad's story, not mine, but once he was subbing for a 7th grade all boys school and he had to use the restroom. While he was gone, they all jumped out of the window and ran away. Hahaha, we did this to our regular 8th grade teacher once. It wasn't actually that funny. Not a substitute, but here is pretty nasty story. This substitute is an elderly one, 65 years of age. The class she was subbing had a student with extreme anger issues, physical violence, obscenities, gestures, etc. She appeared to have not been notified that this student had such problems and was grossly underprepared. In the middle of class, she said something that set him off. First he threw a water bottle at her, then he threw a chair desk. To top it off, he ran straight at her and smashed her into the teacher's desk hard enough to break her back and a few ribs. Students were so terrified they didn't stop his charge. Only one girl had enough sense to go next door to ask that teacher to dial 911. The sub was taken to the hospital and what happened to the student was never disclosed. Once, I went to a notoriously bad school. In a single morning, I was punched in the boob by a kid during recess supervision. I was charged at by a student during recess, too, and I had 2 kids making out in the back of the classroom. This was a grade 6 class, so 11 to 13-year-olds. When I asked them to stop, other kids in the class said, "And I crap you not, it's okay, they're cousins." In another city's school system, I've been accused of whipping a glue stick at a child's head, hitting a kid over the head with a beater stick. Sure, as a sub it sucked, but remember being a kid and loving sub days because you knew you didn't have to do any real work. In 8th grade we had an old black woman sub for us. A couple times she would take a deep sniff of her sleeve, and she had us talk amongst ourselves before she promptly passed out on her desk. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.